And welcome back to the Word Conscious Classroom, where we are consciously and deliberately building our students' vocabulary knowledge and word consciousness. Today, we are looking at analogies. Analogies are very, very powerful for building vocabulary. So if you always wanted to know, how can I increase my vocabulary? Then analogies is the way. Analogies also support critical thinking because you have to think about the different relationships within the analogy. Some say analogies are equations with words. So we are going to look at how do you go about solving analogies. So here you would identify the relationships within the analogy. Analogies can have over 16 different types of relationships. Analogies can give the kind of, part of, something used to, someone who, a product of, an association, a characteristic, antonyms, synonyms, and a sequence. So let's break down those relationships. The first one is compare. So we can say analogies compare different ideas. Analogies can compare through synonyms, antonyms, or a sequence. So for example, for synonyms, it can look at similarities between ideas. So crate is to box. So crate is a type of box. It can also look at the opposites within ideas. So we can look at antonyms. For example, outward is to inward. So they're totally opposite concepts. And then we can compare by sequence. We could say guppy is to trout. So you have a sequence. You're going from something that's small or baby or infant to the adult or the mature or the expert. So you can do a sequence within the analogies. So that is the comparing aspect of analogies. So when you compare something, you show similarities. Okay. Now, the next thing analogies do is classify. Analogies can actually classify concepts through different mechanisms. For example, you can do the kind of, or part to whole, or a product of. So in other words, when you are classifying, you're putting or arranging things into categories or groups based on some shared qualities. So if you're doing classification by kind of, then you could say a worm is to a parasite. So it's in that family or that group. When you're doing part to whole classification, you could say cockpit is to plane. So that's a part of the whole. And vice versa, it could be whole to part. You can also classify by product of. So you could say it's glass is to sand. So glass is a product of sand. So that's how you are classifying or arranging by shared qualities. So analogies help you think in terms of kind of, part to whole, and product of by classifying. And then finally, analogies can be descriptive. So we define descriptive as seeking to describe or illustrate objectively. So if it's being descriptive, then we can look at the characteristic of it, or an association. What is it related to? Or object, action. We can describe it that way. We can describe it as something that's used to, or someone who. So let's look at each of those descriptive pieces. If we're looking at the characteristic, then we can say smooth is to silk. So now they both are similar. You have smooth, and then silk itself is smooth. So smooth is a characteristic of silk. And then you can have association. Association is what you are linked to. So an island is to ocean. So the association between an island and an ocean is that an island is surrounded by an ocean. So that's that association. You can have object to action. So we have horse is to trot. So here the object is the horse, and what is the action? He trots or she trots. So object to action. Then you can have something used to. So it could be a hammer, it could be a desk, it could be a computer. In this case, car is to drive. So you're looking at the car, it's being used to drive. So that's how you're describing its usage. Finally, someone who. So you can have a descriptive analogy that has a relationship of someone who does something. For example, chauffeur is to drive. So the chauffeur is the someone who, and then whatever action that he or she is doing to compare with the next relationship. So someone who, chauffeur is to drive, as maybe a chef is to cooking. So these are descriptive analogies. That's just the beginning of the different types of relationships. There's way, way more relationships, and we don't have time to go over all of them. But if you know those, that's off to a good start. So like we said earlier, analogies identify relationships. And so you may see the analogy set up like this. Like we said, it's a word equation. And so we have blank is to blank as blank is to blank. So the analogy is set up that way. Excuse me. So the colon represents is to, and when you have a double colon, that represents as. So is to, as. And so we read the analogy just like that. Here's an example. Beak is to bird as trunk is to elephant. And that's exactly how we would read the analogy. And we could take a look at these relationships. Is this a classifying relationship, a descriptive relationship, or a comparative relationship? Well, let's see. Beak is to bird. So this looks like it's a part of. So remember when we did the part of, we said that part of was a part of the classifying. And part of, such as cockpit, is to plane. So this looks like it's a classifying analogy. Beak is a part of the bird, as trunk is a part of the elephant. So analogies may look difficult in the beginning, but when you really take the time to look at each of the words, you can easily look at what is happening and decide which relationship it is trying to function with. So we're looking for the function of the analogy. Is it trying to function with a comparative relationship, with a classifying relationship, or with a descriptive relationship? Well, that's for you to know. You can find that out by doing some analogies exercises. Well, thanks for tuning in. Keep on watching. We have lots in store.